I'm standing here in a magnificent piece of forest in the Walpole Wilderness of Western Australia. This area contains some of the oldest and largest trees on Earth and remains relatively undisturbed by human activity. However, unlike most of the forest region in Western Australia, this particular area has not been burned for the past 80 years, making it unique from a scientific point of view. Unfortunately, this is all about to change. The Department of Environment and Conservation is planning to burn this area in spring 2011. This area is known to DEC as 407. It sits between Walpole and Nornalup on the southern coast of Western Australia.
Back in 1960, I came here as a seven-year-old boy, and in between milking cows and feeding pigs and things, this was my playground really. I used to be able to run through this forest bare feet, and there's a piece left here that's still exactly like it was then. The only reason that the forest stays like that is because it wasn't burnt, and this piece here, Douglas Hill, hasn't been burnt since 1937. Okay, so this is what I wanted to try and show you, is that this is this open forest that as a child I used to run through down to the river to catch marron. And this is a really valuable example of long unburnt forest. And the thing that we need to do is retain this as a scientific opportunity to look at what happens if you don't burn the forest. Burning this will simply propagate millions of understory seeds, mainly the wattle and the hazel. This is the last piece left in the Walpole Nornalup National Park. There's no more left. If they burn this now, there's nothing left. We've lost a lot of it. So that's what's important, I think, is to keep this piece as the last example of pre-European forest. It's not managed, it looks after itself. What we should do is leave this piece as an example of long unburnt, low fuels, declining fuels, and let's just look after it. This mulch that's here is what feeds the trees with nutrition, and if we burn this, it denies the forest of all this nutrition that should be going into the soil to feed the forest with nutrient. So basically all we're doing is turning all this into CO2. This is a 70-year-old hazel tree that is providing seed without the need of fire, so that although the majority of the wattle and hazel has gone from here, so we've got this beautiful open floor forest, there's still a couple of these left here to provide the seed. So we don't need to burn all this to provide the ongoing seed of the wattle and hazel. The forest has got all this sorted. Prior to the Europeans getting here, the Aborigines just burnt small patches near where they lived to attract the game to those patches. The rest of Australia, they just left alone. When we burn the tingle forest, this is what happens to them. The base of them catches fire and they turn into this massive fire trunk that hollows out the base of them. And I can remember as a child when this used to go on, when the prescribed burning first started, this hollow piece here would burn and you'd hear this roaring inferno going. Our farm is just half a kilometre away, and in winter you'd hear this enormous crash, and these big giants had come down because the soil would soften and the edge couldn't cope with this stress, because it's only this thin. See how thin this is? I mean, this enormous tree isn't designed to sit on this edge. This tree is designed to sit on this should be full of tree trunk, not shelled out like this. In the area that I showed you before, there wasn't any of this. It was all open rush, that broadleaf rush. Here we've propagated, since the prescribed burn, the government through the Department of Environment and Conservation has propagated this understory. What's going to happen here is that this wattle and hazel is going to fill this understory of what was that beautiful open forest into this impenetrable thicket. And that's the point that I think is really important. Instead of being able to look through an open forest, within 2 or 3 years we'll fill up the forest and become a fire threat. This was a long unburnt piece of country, but in 1987 it was prescribed burnt, and you can see how now it's full of wattle and hazel. My estimation is that there's around 50,000 stems per hectare of this stuff, whereas in that the block across the road here, 407, which is the one planned to be burnt, there's around 500 stems per hectare. So if they're desperate to burn things, why not burn this sort of country that's already been burnt previously and provide fire security for the community by reburning this country and leaving the long unburnt country to continue its decline in litter and fuel. One of the main reasons this prescribed burn is taking place is to provide community protection for Walpole and Nornalup. So a compromise that we've come up with is to burn this piece here, which isn't long unburnt. It's been prescribed burnt in the past. So what we're suggesting is that this piece and another piece adjacent to Nornalup could be burnt. Thereby you could burn small pieces adjacent to Walpole and Nornalup, providing fire security for those two communities, and the bulk of the Douglas Hill Walpole Nornalup National Park could then be left in that long unburnt open understory state to retain its character.